Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Harley Quinn's Season 4 finale. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, Harley is on her revenge tour of going after Joker, which I love that she confronts Bethany. Which, I mean, you gotta give props to Bethany for being ride or die up to a certain point. It's like, well, until my children get threatened. But it's like, I also wish we did get to see more of that villainy side. We saw the episode with like, we're doing this, we're going to be villains, but we didn't really get to see it. But I guess this is kind of a little peek into that. Maybe in the future we get to see it. But like I said, Bethany was very ride or die. Even the kids were like coming in with weapons, being like, yo, you're not going to threaten our mom and threaten like our family clown. But the moment Bethany's all right, because it's like, okay, kind of had a cave when Harley potentially could threaten your kids, so you love Joker, but you love your kids more. And he's not too mad about it. He's like, wow, Harley, threatening kids? That's not very hero of you. But she's like, nah, I'm not. I mean, and I love that this episode, this finale, is the culmination of this story arc we've been like going back and forth with, this complicated dichotomy of who Harley Quinn is. You know, former villain, now hero, but now juggling that of like, you know, being that hero while also your girlfriend's a super villain who is now the leader of the Legion of Doom. So that complicated dichotomy. I thought it was interesting, too, that her Batgirl at the hospital, because I was like, oh, she's just wearing her mask, meaning you took her to the hospital in her suit. I'm like, well, I thought that would have brought up some complications, but it's like, well, you're connected to the Waynes and you're probably able to take some of that funds and just pay off doctors. I mean, it could just be like the Bat family might just have their own doctors on standby. Like, all right, we just make sure that these particular doctors look after us. Or maybe they're just like, all right, we know you're a vigilante, but we won't like get rid of your identity. You know, you have that patient doctor confidentiality. Because at first I was like, because I know obviously Lee Tompkins has a connection to the Bat family. Once again, I didn't find out until Titans. I didn't realize that character. I thought she was just a character for Gotham. I didn't realize, like, no, that character has deep history connected to the Bat family in the comics. But I know she's an ally. I don't know if she's traditionally a doctor in the comics like she was in Gotham, but probably was. I looked her up like a year or two ago. It was because she popped up in an episode of Titans. I don't remember if it was season 3 or I think it was season 3 when she popped up. But either way, because of that, it might even been a season 2 episode, I don't remember now. I think it was a season 3 episode. Either way, because she popped up in one episode, I looked up and found out about that. But that's what I was wondering, like, not unless these doctors kind of have that same kind of like Lee Tompkins relationship with the Bat family, like there are people who work under her. Because I was wondering, because I had to go back in the episode, I was like, that's not that nurse's name. It's like, no, her name is Leanne. So that's not Lee, but still, I was wondering. I love that Harley's just shit talking the entire time. It's like, well, it's not like, you gotta also be careful, like the nurses around here will steal your phones, and she's just looking at Harley throwing all the shade. It's like, oh, you brought all these casseroles, who you think is gonna wash them, Harley? It's like, oh, Leanne, it's not like she's doing anything else. It's just like, man, throwing all the shade. But also, I think it also makes sense on some level, her being, let's not forget, Harley is a doctor in her own right, licensed psychologist, so it kind of, she probably would, you know, doctors probably beef with other doctors, especially doctors in other fields and stuff. But either way, well, she probably looks down on her even more because it's like, you're not even just like a nurse, you're a nurse who does nothing. It's probably that type of thing. Either way, I mean, she might also just not be the biggest fan of anyone in the medical field in general. Now I think about it in retrospect, but I thought it was interesting when she didn't tell Gordon about who shot Barbara. But it's like, well, yeah, because she wants to handle it herself, which she does keep putting it off when the time comes of like, well, what's she going to do to Joker? And he's like pushing her to be like, well, you're not actually going to do anything because that's not the hero thing to do. But if you were really the villain you claim to be that you are right now, you would have just killed me already. She's like, well, I'm in the middle. It's like, well, if you're in the middle, you know what? That makes you a normie. And so you're not going to do this. If you were going to kill me, you would have done it by now. You wouldn't be like making every excuse not to do it. So trying to exact her revenge while still also kind of leaving behind her hero code, but still not fully giving it up. And at the same time, Ivy's got to deal with the aftermath of, yeah, I beat Lex, but it doesn't really feel like a victory because technically isn't one, because everyone around her, the group is like, oh, like, yeah, you kind of take the loss and you win and you lose sometimes, but we're business women. Like, this isn't about like kind of crushing the patriarchy or anything like that. It's like, yeah, just keep things going, because at the end of the day, this isn't like a man versus women thing. This is like we're one percenters. We're all one percenters fighting with another one percenter. And it's just about doing what's best for us business wise. We're not getting so caught up in some BS of like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I mean, the future is, evil, like feminine evil, but, they lean into that, but like I said, it is a culmination of just like one percenters. It's just like, because you're one percenters before you're man and female, I think, type of situation. Because even the female evil is just, it's just about branding and stuff. So, but Ivy just feels like, no, I'm supposed to actually be taking charge. It just doesn't feel like I'm really winning. It felt like a hollow victory when Lex is able to just relocate to the moon like nothing's a problem. And we're celebrating his 40th birthday for like the 16th time. And then everyone's just so copacetic and okay with it. It's just, right, you thought you were going to break the system. Once again, she wanted to do socially conscious evil. And everyone's like, oh, that's cute. Oh, you were actually being serious about that? I mean, like, wait, everything I've done meant nothing. And I love that Ivy says this line later on about the Legion of Doom. It's like, oh, but all that you built. She's like, I didn't build anything. I was just a placeholder. Like, that's because at the time I had said that about the Johns, that when Lex gave Ivy the Johns, I didn't know if he was doing that legitimately, being like, oh, here are the Johns and stuff. Like, he did seem kind of like, wait, the Johns are dead? So he was kind of hoping to probably get them back at the end of it all, but he wanted to build Ivy up, but it's because letting her do her thing helps build up the Legion of Doom. And it's like, you were keeping the seat warm for me as I came back to reclaim my throne after I became so much more powerful. Like, you were just a cog in this long plan ahead. Like, I thought that's why I was like, is he gaslighting Ivy so he could build her up just to tear her down? But it's like, no, even all of that was part of his larger plan. So it's like, I didn't really build anything. I just played the role that Lex tried to cast me in. Like, I was just playing my role of lead. This wasn't something I built. I just took over it. And that ended up being this interesting lesson that her and Harley walked away from this season of trying to change things from the inside. I mean, that's always the thing of like, right, the way you can change something is from the inside, but when the cards are so stacked against you, it doesn't feel like it is. Like, how can you break a system when it's been integrated to be this thing for so long? I mean, if we, breaking real world wise, that ends up being that thing of, well, how can you break free of a system when everything is set up and everyone inside of it is set up to keep it going, because it benefits everyone for the system to stay the same. We don't want to shake shit up too much because no, that can cut into our business. That can cut into our money. We need to keep everything copacetic. We need to keep things the same. We can pretend like things are going to change and it helps boost us up even more. That's what Ivy was supposed to be. She was supposed to be the face of, oh, things are changing. She's a girl boss. But it's like, no, it's the same old shit. She was just a figurehead for this, just once again, long enough for Lex to swoop in and, do his thing. So Ivy and Harley decide to go to the moon, the party crash, and ultimately we find out what Lex had done. We know blotting out the sun whole thing was about stopping Superman. Well, further plan is, and I brought it up too with the hair. I was like, it seemed like he's growing hair, specifically black hair, because I looked it up recently. He was originally, like, when he was first brought into the comics, like early on before going bald, he was a redhead. So it seems like he is traditionally a redhead. But I was like, that's so interesting. Why has he got black hair? Is it just to be like Superman? It's exactly like that, because his whole thing was about snatching Superman's power. He stole from him physically and mentally, and even stole his hair. I do love that he's kind of wearing, like, the traditional, like, Lex Luthor has the mech suit and everything. Even stole his cape. It's like, I guess that's also the reason why he, like, loves the Superman sex thing, because it's like, oh, I want to see you vulnerable, and I want to be the one that's in control of you. Like, what does he do? He watches because he likes to see Superman in a vulnerable position, and I want to take all that. I want to be the one that's in control of your power. And what does he have now? He has all that power. So Ivy tries to stand up against Lex, tries to kill him, but that doesn't go well. And Harley was like, yo, I'm not going to let you, like, smack around the woman I love. And they're kind of embarrassed at the party. And it's just, it was all for nothing this season for them, that it's like everything they did just kind of amounted to nothing. But at the end of the day, they walked away with a bigger lesson of like both of them trying their hardest in their respective fields, whether it's as a hero or whether it's as a conscious supervillain trying to like social conscious supervillain. You know, you can't change the system because it's rigged, but at the end of the day, like we're both outsiders. At least Harley found her route as an outsider. I think Ivy probably still defines herself as a villain, but Harley doesn't define her, because I was wondering like, okay, is this going to lead to anti-hero? But it's like, no, she's not in the middle. She's an outsider. That's her role in all of this. Kind of just, I think at the end of the day, doing what she wants to do. I think outsider probably tilts towards anti-hero, but I think it's even more so out of, I don't adhere to anyone. I just do what I want to. If I want to save people, cool. I'm going to save people. If I don't want to, if I want to go full villain, then I can go full villain. Like, I don't have to do things the way it's been set up or the way things have been before. I get to handle things my way. And especially when Ivy ends up like wanting to use the laser to, you know, blow shit up. And I love they got Barbara, who's in the hospital, to step into her Oracle role, and she's hacking in to Lex's vehicle, which I thought was interesting. I was like, why are you in a vehicle despite you having Superman's power? And I'm like, it depends on the continuity, because some stuff makes it seem like, okay, so supers can't fly in space without, you know, air. It's a situation where they have to wear a helmet. So I'm assuming like, well, he is human, having taken all of Superman's powers, but I don't know if that makes you part Kryptonian or not. Like I said, it just depends on the continuities, because some stuff, the Kryptonians can fly in space without a suit or helmet. Other things, they need it. So, because like even take like Supergirl and Superman and Lois, like the TV shows, because Supergirl, she needs a suit and like needs a helmet and everything. But in Superman and Lois, like there have been plenty of times he's in the atmosphere and it hadn't been an issue. I mean, he literally flew to the moon to fight, spoilers, the final fight of season 3. I won't spoil who it is, but it's like, yeah, he flew into space to do that. Funny enough, the timing on that's interesting. I mean, maybe Superman has different stories tied to the moon, but it's just like, right, here's a moon story at the end of this season, and there's a moon situation at the end of Superman and Lois. How serendipitous. I'm sure that was definitely not planned. That was just like, it probably happenstance. It just kind of, because it's just like, hey, I'm sure the season was written a while back. I mean, they could always change stuff, but you know, that seemed like that was already kind of set in stone. I mean, we already had the moon setting earlier in the season, so. Lex doesn't seem like he's dead. They just kind of shipped him off, I guess, to Apocalypse. I don't know if he's supposed to be like Steppenwolf's whipping boy now or something, which is interesting how that ties into something else we're going to talk about later. But I'm wondering, is he just going to be a prisoner on Apocalypse, or like, what is his deal now? Like, is it just going to be like a long, torturous thing of like, oh, we're going to torture him? And I guess that's the end of Lex for now, not unless he ends up returning, but probably not. And Ivy then proceeds to, well, they luckily got everyone out of each of the buildings, but Ivy blew up a building that was tied to some of the women she worked with, even blew up the Legion of Doom. So luckily everyone got out of there, which I love Gordon being like, so does that mean we work from home now? It's like, I don't know. Do you? That is kind of, it's a stupid question, but at the same time, it's actually a really interesting question. What does the Legion of Doom do when they operate remotely from home now that their base is gone? I mean, the main headquarters at the very least, so. The moon starts cracking apart because of the laser turning against the planet of the moon and destroying it, so. I love that Harley did end up saving Superman, and it's like, oh yeah, you're going to tell the rest of the Justice League like a normie saved you? He's like, I always knew you were a hero. She's like, no, I'm better than a hero. I'm fucking Harley Quinn. I'm like, yeah, you are. So I was like, that's interesting. And then Superman proceeds to put the moon back together. Because even I was about to say, we're just going to let the moon literally cracked in half. No, never mind. Superman put it back together. So I was like, that's really, really interesting. Which that whole situation led to Bruce being like, right, I got to get out of prison. I got to go back. The world needs Batman again. Which, in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense. Bruce is the most influential and most powerful person in Gotham, so it makes sense. You could have easily gotten out of prison at any point in time. I mean, to be fair, you kind of turned yourself in last season, so you could have fought that more, and you could have gotten out at any point in time. I even love the DJ necklace, and it's like, oh, it's time to get back into it. So he basically paid off a judge by sending her, like, that judge's like daughter to like giving them like a record deal or something like that. So he got out just as everything that Alfred was doing the entire season in the background to get sent to Blackgate just for Bruce to get out and for him to be stuck. I mean, I'm assuming he'll find his way out of that. Or I don't know if Bruce is going to waste his time trying to like fix that for Alfred. He was just like, oh, see you back home. So it's like, okay, figure it out on your own. Or maybe if I'm desperate enough, your replacement was kind of there. He is still his prison butler, but I don't know if that translates outside of the Blackgate walls or not. So that was an interesting development. But also, like, right, he was sitting on the sideline the entire season. So season 3 ended up with him in jail. Season 4 ends with him back out there, which is interesting because he's back to being a solo act now because Damien's kind of kicking in with his mom. Nightwing, we'll talk about the circumstances in a little bit. And then you have Barbara who quits. You know, it's just kind of, I think for her, they all were kind of trying to find their new place post blowing up their respective employment situations. So Barbara's kicking it with Harley and Ivy, and then all of a sudden, Catwoman showed up. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, look, Nightwing's grave is empty." I'm like, "Wait, we're not doing that, are we?" Which we'll get to, like I said, in a second. And it's like, well, why'd you come back? Like, did you come back to actually help her? She's like, oh, the Gotham, can't ignore the Gotham City sirens. I was like, shut up. I was like, you're doing that? I was like, that's amazing. That's so amazing. Cause that's one of those DCEU projects I'm so bummed we never got. Cause obviously for a while on the slate of like potential movies that were kind of announced was going to be a Gotham Sirens movie. Obviously it's, if I remember correctly, it's Harley, Ivy, and Catwoman. I don't know if there's anyone else besides them, but I think they're the traditional Gotham Sirens. Because I blurred that together with the Birds of Prey because of the Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn movie. It kind of throws me for a loop because it's like, oh, the Gotham City Sirens. And Harley's like, oh, I like that. And Ivy's like, yeah, I guess, but I was kind of, keen for like the Cop Squad, but it's okay. And then you have Barbara being like, oh, I was thinking like, the Birds of Prey, and they're like, what? No, that's not going to work. Like, none of us are like birds or anything, especially because you're not part of the Bat family anymore, so it still doesn't stick. But I'm like, there's so many things with that because that's my problem is I conflate those two groups, and I'm like, because Barbara's part of the Birds of Prey, but she's not part of the Gotham Sirens, right? I don't think she is. Because I think our trio of Catwoman, Ivy, and Harley are traditionally the Gotham City Sirens, I think. Apparently, looking at the roster, there's been, like, apparently Batman's been a part of it, Joker, Talia, interesting, Zatanna, Riddler, Nightwing, and even Penguin have been a part of it. That's just a quick Google, because I know, like, there's been so many people a part of, like, the Birds of Prey and stuff like that. But like I said, just the timing of it's interesting, too, because, like, because I always felt like they would have spun off, like, a Gotham Siren situation from the Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn movie. That's why I also think like the timing's interesting for Barbara to be like, oh, the Birds of Prey, and then like for Harley to be there. I think it's kind of interesting. That's also a complicated thing, but I guess we're going to just brush over it because like Ivy was kind of nervous, like, oh, hey, I mean, to be fair, she was always weird around Selena in season 1. I want to say that was season 1. Might have been season 1 or in season 2. I don't remember. No, that might have been season 2 when Catwoman was first introduced and like Ivy just let her walk all over her. But then like obviously last season we found out there was a thing between them. They were in a relationship and everything. So maybe that's also why Ivy's still a little weird because now like you're part of a group with your current girlfriend and then your ex, well, one of your exes, and that's kind of a complicated mess that turned into last season during the whole Court of Owls orgy situation. So that's quite a sentence, a very real sentence that this show made me say. But that's just interesting. So, once again, I guess leaning into like once again, they're outsiders of, we're going to be heroes in some capacity, but villains in others. And once again, just kind of walking our own lane, making our own decisions. And that's why I thought, like I said, thought it was so interesting considering like that's happening while Bruce is coming back as Batman, but he's the only one there. He, once again, might not even have Alfred. Might be it's going to be interesting to see him kind of going solo, and I'm curious to see what that means for him and Harley's relationship, because they didn't have any interactions at all this season, but like the bonding that they had last season, I'd love to see the more continuous development of that relationship, especially with Barbara working, as Oracle with them. Because there's twofold to it, because obviously, like, I know there was a Birds of Prey TV show, but I never saw. My only experience was like the little cameo appearances we got for Crisis on Infinite Earths with the Arrowverse. But then there was also, I was brought up the Gotham City Sirens. I know we got like a live action version in the Gotham show. I want to say it was Tabitha Barbara, not Barbara as in Batgirl Barbara, but Barbara's mom Barbara, and Selena, if I remember correctly. I know Poison Ivy was in the show, but I don't remember she was ever part of that squad. I think Tabitha kind of filled that role, because there was a sort of Harley Quinn-esque character in the show called Echo, but that was, so it wasn't a more traditional Gotham City Sirens, but it was, an approximation for that show. So, which is just funny now, considering like, and here's I made that reference, and now here's Batgirl Barbara, who's part of the Gotham City Sirens. So I think that's interesting. Does beg the question, because we don't know if there's been any other we don't know if there's been any other Robins in this continuity we know there's been a Jason Todd, because it's been referenced that Joker killed him. They even had a homage to that at the Villies. But we don't know about the other Robins, whether there's been a Stephanie Brown, a Tim Drake, or even a Carrie Kelly in this continuity. So he could always get a new Robin in that regard. So one of those three could always end up popping up later on, But then we also have the Stinger, where it's like, we'll wait to find out what happened to Nightwing's body, and it turns out Talia is resurrecting him. I guess purely because Damian asked her to, or maybe she has plans of her own, which now he's back and he's like, where's Harley? It's like, well, to be fair, he thinks Harley did it, which she did, but he won't know that, because it's like, well, there was a mashed potato clone, so how's Barbara going to react when she finds out that Harley actually killed him and not the clone? I mean, but even if you says the clone, he still is going to have a chip on his shoulder, so that's going to be interesting. Like I said, Damian's away from the family, the Bat family, just kind of doing his own thing with his mom now. I'm leaning into that Al Ghul side of things. Which also, like, does Dick typically have a connection to the Lazarus Pit? Because it's like Titan's last season in the Gotham season of season 3 is when he got resurrected by the Lazarus Pit. So I'm like, I don't think that was done intentionally. Like, I don't know if that was just them doing their own story and it just happenstance that worked out like that, or maybe he does have his own traditional connections to the Lazarus Pit in the comics that I'm just not aware of. So I just looked at a list at 10 different characters, Batman characters, that have been resurrected by the Lazarus Pit, and Dick Grayson was only on the list because apparently he resurrected or used the Lazarus Pit on Batwoman. I never knew that that's how Jason Todd came back, was the Lazarus Pit. I thought that was something he just did for Titans. I didn't realize, no, that's how he comes back as Red Hood. What's that? I did not know that. I should have known that was the case, but I guess I always just assumed it was kind of like a Batgirl thing of like, she's dead, but it's like, no, she's back as just one of those things you just kind of quickly brush over. I thought that's like, I didn't really die. I never really thought about no, I mean, Joker did like literally bash him in with a crowbar, but either way, tensions and all that aside, it sets a lot of really, really interesting dynamics going forward. Because obviously with this, we mainly focus on like our core cast, and like a lot of our side characters were just kind of like, we got a little bit of Clayface this episode when he was singing, kind of doing his Marilyn Monroe thing for Lex's birthday. And, because I was curious what they were going to do with the whole Talia situation, considering how they set that up. But it's like, she's going to be maybe a major threat next season, especially who's got Nightwing, who's gunning for Harley. We'll see how that plays out. Once again, Batman's return, stuff like that is definitely going to be interesting to see. I'd also forgot to talk about it, but there was that whole bit where Harley ended up handing Joker over to Gordon, and Gordon had that whole bit about like, oh, A24 horror movies, because he was gonna like clamp cables to Joker's nuts and electrocute him. He's like, I don't understand A24 horror movies, but like Barbara introduced me to them, but I know what it means to like, electrocute someone that way, which I love that being a callback to Joker calling out Harley's approach to, it's like, oh, you've watched too many movies, which when I hear that, I don't think of A24 movies, but to be fair, like, I don't think I've actually seen any A24 movies. I want to change that, but I just haven't seen any, even on the more horror side of things. That feels like a very like Reservoir Dogs and maybe James Bond specific Casino Royale almost type of feel. So, but that's what, but I get the sentiment of like, it's a very movie thing of you to kind of come up with. But I am so curious to see what Gordon does. I mean, granted, he's not a cop anymore. I mean, yes, he was working security at the Legion of Doom, but he's not a cop anymore. So I'm curious, is he just going to keep Joker and just torture him, which is going to be wild? And what happens? I mean, does Barb know about that? I mean, now with her situation being what it is, like, will she care about that? Stuff like that is what I'm so curious about. So, and I love Joker just being like, right, I don't care what you do. Just go ahead and make it easy and just put a bullet in my head. It's like, which seems weird considering, I mean, all this was about him gaining back his reputation, and it kind of means nothing now. I mean, you basically Harley walked you around on a leash most of the episode. So I'm so curious to see what his future holds, and maybe Bethany and the kids will end up rescuing him from Gordon. Maybe that's what the future holds in that regard. I'm so curious to know what they're going to do with Joker, considering his circumstances. We are taking off heavy hitters off the board. Like I said, we already moved Lex from the board, so I doubt we're removing Joker. I mean, he was kind of removed from the board for a while because he was a family man, but, it's going to be interesting to see what that future holds. At the time of me recording this, it hasn't been decided whether or not, or at least hasn't been revealed whether or not the show is getting greenlit for a 5th season. I hope so. But once again, the DC situation, even the animated stuff is still kind of in flux. We know My Adventures with Superman is getting another season, but that was already kind of a set up thing. So this is kind of in its own lane of, well, what do we, whether or not it kind of, I hope the numbers are good enough that they decide to at least give it one more season to wrap things up. Because I want the show, I always prefer a show kind of going out on its own terms, but I'd rather them get the notice of, hey, you get one more season, and I mean, to even have as many seasons as it has so far, it's kind of, I think, a blessing in so many regards. I think it's just because the show has got its own pretty hardcore fan base. But obviously, the timing's really interesting because luckily I got to this episode late. I didn't jump on this episode immediately today. Well, yesterday, because it's like 3:00 in the morning when I'm recording this. But the teaser trailer dropped for the Kite Man spinoff, Kite Man, hell yeah, because of course. Which I think I brought that up in a previous episode, wondering what the status of that was. I don't remember. Like, it seemed like it was still out there, but I didn't see any updates for it. And just funny enough, getting some updates now. No official release date yet, but I'm assuming that's going to be sometime fairly soon, really. So, and that's why I was bringing up the whole Lex and Steppenwolf thing, because in that teaser we see Darkseid. So I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And we see Harley. So obviously, we're going to be in the same universe and characters are going to pop in, but we'll probably get a little Harley, little Ivy here and there. But it was mainly circling around some villains and Kite Man and Golden Glider. So that's obviously, but we'll probably get some appearances here and there from some of the other main and supporting cast of Harley Quinn. So I'm excited for that. But like I said, I hope the show at Harley Quinn at least gets one more season. And I'd love to see where we go with, like I said, these Gotham City Sirens and just how things kind of play out. And I mean, I'm curious, I don't know if it's the exact same team. I'd assume it is, but I don't know if it's a completely different team who's doing the Kite Man show. Because I was thinking that, well, I don't know if that's going to be kind of a parallel of because obviously Kite Man wasn't in this season at all. So it could be, he was for not in the episode because he was in the future, but that was about it. But we never got to really interact with him. So I'm wondering, could the entire first season of Kite Man, hell yeah, be happening parallel to this season of Harley Quinn, I'm curious about all that. Or will it be a sequel that kind of picks up a little bit without giving too much of what potential season 5 of Harley is. You get a little like catch up and stuff like that of kind of what's going on. 'Cause I think the last time we saw him in Golden Glider was like the Valentine special. I'm fairly sure they popped up in that for a little bit, but either way. Which does beg the question, too, because of the whole future thing. That was something Harley and Ivy had brought up of, well, what does that mean about our daughter? She might exist or she might not exist because we did kind of change the future. So it does beg the question how things going to play out. Like I said, fingers crossed, hoping for a 5th season. I'm excited for the Kite Man spinoff, but I would also love to get another season of Harley Quinn as well. So, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.